In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, September 15th. North Korea's Kim Jong-un remains in Russia and tours a plant for fighter jets and a shipyard of battleships on this Friday, while South Korea and the U.S. warn against an arms deal between Pyongyang and Moscow. Meanwhile, the country's inflation prospects appear murky amid the presence of external factors, including rising oil prices, but quite a number of pundits believe the pace of consumer price hikes will slow in the course of the year. And over in Libya, the African country's death toll continues to escalate, surging past 11,000 as the coastal city of Derna bears the brunt of the heavy downpours. We start in Russia, where North Korea's Kim Jong-un takes a tour of a production plant for Moscow's fighter jets early this morning, as the South Korean and U.S. administrations renew their warning against a potential weapons deal between Russia and North Korea. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Arirang reports.
A private train that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been using arrived in the city of Khabarovsk at around 8:50 a.m. on Friday. That's according to Russia's TASS news agency. Kim reportedly looked around a high-tech aircraft production plant in Khabarovsk, which mainly produces the Sukhoi Su-57 high-tech multi-purpose fighter jet as well as private jets. It seems that the North Korean leader will also visit a local shipyard to look at attack submarines and warship building facilities. His last stop in Russia is expected to be Vladivostok. There he will likely tour the Russian Pacific Fleet, where he might actually go on a warship and watch a military exercise. Kim will then head back to North Korea. The U.S. Department of Defense meanwhile said that the South Korea-U.S. joint military drills won't be affected by the possible North Korea-Russia military exercises. Asked about the intention of potential Pyongyang-Moscow drills, Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said on Thursday that although the intention is unknown, it cannot stop any military ties between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. She also warned North Korea of supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Providing any type of arms to Russia would again violate the UN Security Council resolutions that Russia itself voted for. So we would encourage that North Korea, not pursue a deal with Russia.
The South Korean government also said that any actions by North Korea and Russia that violate UN Security Council resolutions and threaten South Korea's security will come at a clear cost. The National Security Council committee members on Thursday called on Moscow and Pyongyang to not get involved in an arms trade. Kim and Putin could possibly meet again soon, as the Kremlin on Thursday said that the Russian leader accepted Kim's invitation to visit the North with pleasure. The Kremlin spokesperson added that every bilateral agreement will be made through diplomatic channels. It also said that the two leaders exchanged rifles during their summit on Wednesday. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
And the Biden administration has shared a fresh and far-reaching sanctions list that includes institutions and individuals in countries like Turkey and Georgia alleged to be assisting Russia in its aggression against Ukraine. Our Lee Sing-jae explains.
In what is one of the largest sanctions packages announced by the U.S. State and Treasury Departments, Washington on Thursday issued a fresh round of sanctions against over 150 entities involved with helping Russia evade sanctions and supporting Moscow in its war against Ukraine. Those involved with helping Russia include businesses and people in Turkey, Georgia, the UAE, Russia, and more. According to Reuters, the latest designations target shipping and trade companies involved in helping repair sanctioned vessels linked to Russia's defense ministry, while also helping with the transfer of dual-use goods, items which have both civilian and military application. It also targets those that sell Western technology to Moscow that could be used to fuel its war in Ukraine. However, watchers have raised concerns over the fact that some of the entities targeted in Washington's latest sanctions package are from Turkey. The U.S. imposed sanctions on 5 Turkish companies and 1 Turkish national linked with helping Russia evade sanctions and supporting Moscow in its war in Ukraine. However, the U.S. State Department says it's not worried that measures taken against Turkish firms will derail Sweden's NATO bid.
We have a constructive, warm relationship with the Turkish government. They are an important ally of ours, and we don't see that in any way these sanctions should have any impact at all on that accession.
Also, among those sanctioned by the U.S. on Thursday is Russia's largest vehicle manufacturer, AutoVAZ, and a major local copper producer, the Russian Copper Company. 이승재, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, here in capital Seoul, officials from the Yoon and Biden administrations are meeting today to address defense and diplomatic matters under the framework of the extended deterrence strategy and consultation group amid escalating security threats posed by North Korea. Seoul's first Vice Foreign Minister Chang Ho-jin and Vice Defense Minister Shin Bum-chul are sitting down with their U.S. counterparts under Secretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Bonnie Jenkins and Acting Under Secretary of Defense for Policy Sasha Baker, respectively. In other news, President Yoon Suk-yeol will be in New York for the UN General Assembly next week that is, and on his agenda is a final pitch to his counterparts for Busan's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. Our Presidential Office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is looking to strengthen South Korea's status as a globally contributing country while making his biggest push yet for Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. On Wednesday, the presidential office announced that President Yoon will be in New York from Monday to Friday.
During this general meeting, the president will launch an all-out diplomatic campaign to get support for Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. At the moment, around 30 meetings with other leaders are scheduled, with more in the works. This is something that no other South Korean president has attempted during overseas trips.
As soon as he lands in New York, President Yoon will start his series of bilateral meetings with the leaders of Turkmenistan and the Czech Republic, among others. On the second day, he will meet with his Ghanaian counterpart as well as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. A number of bilateral sideline meetings will happen in between, including with 10 countries that South Korea never has met before one-on-one, such as San Marino and St. Lucia. The third day will be when Yoon speaks to the UN General Assembly.
President Yoon will promise to the world continued enhancement of official development assistance to close the global development gaps, support to reduce carbon emissions and the transition to clean energy in climate-vulnerable countries, and for South Korea to be responsible for the world enjoying the benefits of digital technology.
Kim also explained that Yoon will have the opportunity to share South Korea's vision as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2 years starting in 2024. On Thursday, he will be returning to New York University's Digital Vision Forum, as last year he was there to emphasize the importance of digital technologies in contributing to the expansion of freedom. He is expected to re-emphasize South Korea's taking the lead in creating regulations for fair and equitable access to digital assets. On his last day, he will wrap up his stay in New York with meetings with the leaders of the Pacific Islands. While the top office's focus may be on winning votes at BIE for Busan's bid to host World Expo 2030, it does come with the backdrop of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visiting Russia's Vladimir Putin, with the two strengthening military cooperation. An official says the public can expect an appropriate analysis and message for the two in Yoon's speech to the UN General Assembly. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The UNESCO World Heritage Committee has urged Tokyo to abide by its commitment to disclosing the history of Hashima Island in Japan, where the forced labor of Korean people and others took place from the early to mid-1900s. At its 45th session on Thursday in Riyadh, the committee adopted a decision by consensus calling on Tokyo to continue dialogue with concerned states and conduct further research to enhance, quote, the interpretation strategy of the site. Now, this interpretation strategy refers to the promises made by Japan in 2015 to share with the world the history of Hashima Island upon its approval as a heritage site. Japan has since been denounced for whitewashing the history of the coal mining island known as Gunhamdo in Korean. Seoul's foreign ministry, for its part, voiced hopes for Tokyo to report on its related progress by next December, as requested by UNESCO. In Libya, the death toll from flooding there has surged past 11,000 as the coastal city of Derna bears the brunt of the brutal rain-related repercussions. Our Choi Soo-young has the latest.
The death toll from floods in the Libyan city of Derna has soared to 11,300. That's according to the Libyan Red Crescent on Thursday. Rescue efforts are ongoing following the catastrophic dam collapse on September 10th following heavy rain. The number of confirmed deaths is increasing rapidly, and the final death toll could potentially reach up to 20,000 people. Thousands of dead bodies have been buried in mass graves. Scientists say the latest extreme weather event, Storm Daniel, the Mediterranean storm that poured torrential rain on the Libyan coast, shows some of the hallmarks of climate change.
The Libyan situation is obviously catastrophic and a very difficult situation. And with all these events, it's always complicated. The ultimate trigger for it is an extreme storm in the Mediterranean that many are linking to global warming.
Since 2014, Libya has been divided into two rival governments. The government of national unity in the west is recognized by the United Nations, while the Libyan National Army under the military leadership controls the east, where the coastal city of Derna is located. According to BBC reports, these opposing governments, after a long conflict, are now seeking cooperation for humanitarian relief. Libya's Eastern administration approved an emergency budget of 10 billion Libyan dinars, nearly $2 billion on Thursday, to help flood-affected areas.
Today we met regarding the emergency budget for the purpose of voting on it and for the purpose of determining the mechanisms for its distribution and to ensure that the budget will achieve what is required of it or will achieve the purpose of its allocation, which is to help the population rebuild and repair roads and bridges.
Meanwhile, in response, the World Health Organization announced that it would give $2 million from its emergency fund to help the flood victims. The WHO also sent extra emergency supplies and medical supplies from its logistics hub in Dubai. The United Nations, EU, and countries like the UK, Tunisia, and Jordan are among those who have also joined the aid effort. Derna, a small city of around 125,000 people, might have lost 1 in 6 residents if the estimated disaster numbers are accurate. Cho Hyung, Arirang News.
Korea's inflation prospects are looking quite murky amid the presence of external factors, including rising oil prices. But quite a number of pundits believe the pace of consumer price hikes will slow. Our An Sung-jin reports.
Despite a relative slowdown this year, consumer prices in South Korea remain unstable amid continuing external uncertainties. According to economics think tank the Korea Development Institute on Friday, consumer prices in August saw an on-year increase of 3.4%. This indicates improvement from January of this year when the on-year increase was 5.2%. Though the inflation rate has been dropping on a monthly comparison, the rise in prices for energy and agricultural products has pushed last month's figure back up from 2.3% in July. Weather conditions such as heat waves and heavy rain largely attributed to the 2.7% on-year increase for agricultural products, particularly the increased cost of vegetables. Oil prices rose as Russia and Saudi Arabia extended their oil production cuts to the end of this year, while expectations that there will be no further interest rate hikes in the U.S. through the end of 2023 also attributed to climbing oil prices. These factors took their toll on domestic oil prices, which jumped 11% on year. Prices for basic necessities including vegetables, processed food, and petroleum products were also affected, increasing 3.9% on year. Despite global volatile factors that affect consumer prices, the inflation increases are expected to further slow down as improvement in consumer sentiment and semiconductor exports provides some optimism. At a government meeting on Friday, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho emphasized that since core inflation, which excludes these volatile components, is rather stable, the overall inflation for October is set to stabilize. However, he also added that as concerns over soaring oil prices remain, caution is necessary. The government may also extend fuel tax cuts if prices remain high. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And as my colleague An Sung-jin just mentioned, oil prices rose to their highest levels this year on Thursday on the back of supply concerns amid extended production cuts by Saudi Arabia and Russia. Now, Brent crude and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude soared past the $90 mark, hitting highs unseen since last November. The latest surge follows an International Energy Agency report back on Wednesday, forecasting a market deficit until the end of this year amid output cuts by Saudi Arabia and Russia. Health authorities here have issued an influenza alert starting Friday amid this year's unusually long flu season. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, the number of flu cases hit 11.3 per 1,000 people in the first week of September. Now, this is nearly double the expected average for the period. Accordingly, the national influenza vaccination program will begin on September 20th for children who require 2 doses, followed by other children and pregnant women on October 5th. Elderly people can receive their shots from October 11th. A record-low national fertility rate is not a problem for Hwacheon County in Gangwon-do Province, where the rate itself appears to be on the rise. Our Lee Soo-jin was there.
Baby whales and classroom chatter might soon be a thing of the past. This elementary school is just one of many in South Korea that have been abandoned and shut down due to the lack of students. And this comes as South Korea's fertility rate continues to shatter records. The nation's total fertility rate, the average number of children expected per woman, tumbled to a record low of 0.78 last year. As of 2021, South Korea is the only OECD member country where the total fertility rate is less than 1. And this year's fertility rate for the second quarter fell further to 0.7. We asked young South Koreans why they're hesitant to have children.
If I get married, both me and my husband will probably have to work because of the high education costs. But if there's no childcare center that I can trust, it might be better to just not have children.
The reality is that raising a kid is costly because of the high education costs.
But there are still areas in South Korea where fertility rates have actually gone up. This county in Gangwon-do Province has a fertility rate that greatly exceeds the national average. Let's go find out how it has achieved this. We met with the mayor of Hwacheon County, who told us that this was largely due to a decade-long effort to provide a comprehensive support system with a focus on alleviating the education cost burden.
We wanted to provide equal opportunities for people regardless of their economic background, from the time the baby is in their mother's womb until the child graduates college.
The county pays college tuitions of not only students attending domestic colleges, but also any of the world's top 100 universities, as long as they have parents who have lived in Hwacheon for at least 3 years. While the nation's fertility rate has been on a steady decline since 2015, Hwacheon's fertility rate actually rose from 1.2 in 2021 to 1.4 last year. During this period, a new public postpartum rest center opened. Postpartum rest centers are clinics unique to Korean culture that help mothers recuperate after giving birth. Women typically stay at these centers for 2 weeks where staff care for newborns while the mothers rest. They can cost up to around $12,000.
Anyone who's lived in Hwacheon for at least a year can use the center for 2 weeks at no cost. I've lived here for 3 years, so I'm staying here for free.
There are also programs aimed at helping them transition into motherhood smoothly.
The programs that teach us practical skills such as how to bathe a newborn and breastfeed properly have been super helpful.
The county also offers services where elementary school students can hail a bus through a smartphone app.
주로 오는데 얼마 정도 걸려요?
2분.
The bus stops at various locations and parents receive text messages that inform them of their child's location. The importance of coming up with a comprehensive solution like this was echoed by one expert.
The government has already implemented various policies, including financial incentives for having children, improving work-life balance, and expanding childcare services. Yet to be effective, policies must take a comprehensive approach.
She added that there also needs to be more measures aimed at providing affordable housing and stable jobs, as well as creating a cultural shift away from the traditional nuclear family structure. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. On the small Italian island of Lampedusa, over 7,000 migrants and refugees have arrived in just 2 days. The volume of people has exceeded the island's own population of 6,000, and its local reception center is being overwhelmed. Many of the migrants, including children, have been forced to sleep outside. In response, authorities are moving thousands of migrants to Sicily, which has bigger processing facilities. Lampedusa is Italy's southernmost island and is known as a hotspot for migrants looking to cross into Europe from North Africa. The journey is perilous, with many crossing the Mediterranean Sea in flimsy wooden boats. According to the UN Migration Agency, so far this year, at least 2,000 people have died attempting to reach Italy and Malta. In the United States, President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been indicted on 3 federal gun charges. All 3 charges on Thursday relate to allegations that Hunter lied on forms while buying a handgun at a time when he was a drug user. In July, Hunter was set to have the charges against him dropped for pleading guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax crimes and illegally possessing a gun while a drug user. But his plea deal with prosecutors was rejected by a judge, citing concern over the agreement's structure and the scale of its immunity. The president's son is a former lawyer and was discharged from the U.S. Navy in 2014 after testing positive for cocaine. He is also facing an investigation into his business dealings and allegations of tax evasion. And finally, models with disabilities took center stage at New York Fashion Week. Over 70 models took to the catwalk on Wednesday and showcased a range of adaptive clothing specifically designed to give those with disabilities access to fashion. The show was organized by non-profit The Runway of Dreams Foundation, which works with fashion retailers to adapt their clothing to the needs of all consumers. Brands represented at the show included Adidas, Thomas Hilfiger, and Victoria's Secret. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It has been a very rainy and gloomy week with more wet conditions expected through the weekend. Today's rain will mainly come down in central parts of the country. The capital area and parts of Gangwon-do province will see 10 to 60 millimeters of showers. The rest of the country could see 20 to 80 millimeters into Saturday. Southern regions will see rain tapering off and taking a break from this afternoon into tomorrow. So those of you in the southern parts of the country should have highs that are 3 to 4 degrees higher, but breezier in central regions with that rain expected all day today. Seoul and Chuncheon will be topping out at 25 degrees Celsius this afternoon, Daejeon at 24. Meanwhile, Jeju Island will be rain-free today, but rain starts on Jeju tomorrow, and it will rain through next Monday, so please keep an umbrella handy until then. A rainy weekend ahead, and next week looks to be as rainy and cloudy as this week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends this edition of the Daily Report. We return with yet another edition of Issues and Insiders in a few minutes. Do stay with us.